Okay, Chair, I can confirm that the meeting is now being live streamed to the public and being recorded. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sue. Good evening and welcome to the extraordinary virtual meeting of East Devon District Council on the 3rd of May 2022. I'm your Chair, Councillor Ian Thomas. I'd also like to welcome viewers of our live stream or the recording of this meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. Can I remind everyone that due to concerns relating to COVID risk, our Council's delegated much of its decision making to senior officers for the period to the 11th of May 2022. Consequently, this evening will be a consultative meeting only. However, we will work as closely as possible to normal procedural rules as detailed in our Constitution. Where our meeting would normally have decided a matter, it will now make recommendation to a senior officer. That officer will then take our recommendation into account when making their decision. May I remind colleagues that the Code of Practice applies throughout this meeting. We reserve the right to disconnect any disruptive participant. If there's a break in internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. Should we not be successful within 15 minutes, we'll consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. As this is a large meeting, it's particularly important colleagues ensure microphones are muted when not in use, please, to avoid disturbance from background noise. If you wish to speak, please raise your yellow electronic hand and wait to be called. I'd appreciate if you could keep points short and not interrupt while others are speaking. Our full agenda is available online at www.eastdevon.gov.uk. They will now start the meeting with a roll call of members present. When you hear your name, would you please unmute your microphone and confirm by saying present? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen. Councillor Arnott.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Bickley.
Present.
Councillor Blakey.
Present.
Councillor Bonetta. Councillor Brown.
Present. So my internet goes down at times, so you might lose my picture. Okay.
Okay. Councillor Bruce.
Present, Susan. Thank you.
Councillor Cahill.
Present.
Councillor Chamberlain. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Chubb.
Present.
Councillor Coleman. Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Desarum.
Present. Thank you, Sue.
Councillor Dent.
Present. Thank you, Sue.
Councillor Faithful.
Present.
Councillor Gardner.
Present.
Councillor Gazzard. Councillor Hartnell.
Sue, I know there is a Seaton Town Council meeting going on at the moment, so I think Councillor Hartnell and Ledger are hoping to join us shortly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Haywood.
Present. Thank you, Sue.
Councillor Hookway.
Present, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Howe.
Present. Thank you, Sue.
Councillor Hughes.
Present. Thanks, Sue.
Councillor Ingham. Councillor Jackson.
Present. Thanks, Sue.
Councillor Jarvis,
Present, thank you.
Excuse me, Sue. David Key's trying to get into the meeting and can't get in.
okay. I think we've got someone that we didn't know who was trying to get into the meeting, so we'll let him in now.
Right, thank you.
Oh, flip me. Okay, Colin.
Okay. Councillor Johns,
Present, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Young,
Present, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Kemp,
Present, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Key. To get in, perhaps. Councillor Ledger. Okay. Councillor Loudon.
Present, Sue, thank you.
Councillor Manley.
Present.
Councillor McCollum.
Present, thank you, sir.
Councillor Miller.
Present, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Moulding.
Present.
Councillor Parr.
Yes, present. Thank you.
Councillor Pepper. Councillor Pook.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Ranger.
Present, thanks.
Councillor Rixon.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Rowland.
Present, thanks, Sue.
Councillor Rylance.
I'm here.
Councillor Skinner. Councillor Taylor.
Present.
Councillor Thomas.
Present.
Councillor Twiss.
Present.
Councillor Wibley.
Present, thank you, sir.
Councillor Woodward.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Ragg.
Present.
Councillor Chris Wright.
Present.
Councillor Tom Wright.
Present, thank you, Sue.
Okay, Chair.
Thank you.
Over
I
to you.
think based on that, I can now confirm that the meeting's quorate.
Councillor Key is here, and I've been waiting 15 minutes to be let in.
Well, we've got you now, David. So hopefully you've not missed anything too important. Agenda item one is
on the register.
Your attendance is noted, David. Agenda item one is public speaking, as I've got no members of the public registered to speak this evening. Agenda item two is apologies. I've so far received apologies from Councillor Bickley, who's snuck in at Sidmouth Cricket Club, Councillor Kim Bloxham, Ian Hall, Richard Lawrence, Jeff Pratt, and Megan Armstrong. Do we have any other apologies, please?
Yes, you've got Phil's not coming tonight. He's gone to another meeting. Phil Skinner, that is.
Councillor Skinner.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is it Steve Gazzard?
Councillor Gazzard.
Present. Sorry, I'm late.
Oh, you're there now, Steve.
Yeah.
I've just given you
Apologies.
apologies.
No, I'm here. Sorry.
We'll excuse you, Steve. Don't worry. I know it's been a long week.
Yeah.
Anyway, agenda item three are declarations of interest. If during the meeting you wish to make a declaration, could you please state whether your declaration is a personal or prejudicial declaration and exactly what your interest is. And then straight on to agenda item 4, a temporary continuation of virtual meetings. Henry, could I pass over to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Rather than just going through the body of the report, I thought it probably best just to go through the recommendations in brief. I'm sure you've all read it. Effectively, what's being asked is for Council to decide between two options. Option 1 is continuing the existing arrangements until the 31st of October, whereas option 2 is moving to a hybrid solution, which is decision makers in the room with effectively everybody else being able to attend remotely. And that is intended to continue until the 31st of October, contingent on having in place an appropriate IT solution. So it will continue as virtual until that solution is in place. Both options have a backstop date of the 31st of October, but option 2, the hybrid solution, we're able to bring forward the termination of the arrangements when the IT solution is in place. If option 2 is selected, then that will necessitate a budget, and I've asked for, or suggested 40,000 as an upper limit in terms of procuring the IT solution that would facilitate that. In relation to either options, then the rest of the recommendation details effectively the arrangements that have been in place for the last however many months it is. But I will just draw to your attention that the deadline, as I've just explained, would be curtailed in option 2 if we are able to bring in the solution. So they're all contingent on that. The other thing just to note is that in terms of when the meeting arrangements don't apply, the virtual meeting arrangements don't apply. That is to annual council for obvious reasons. And we've also included what's been termed as a safety valve, which is the final element of paragraph C, which is just that where there is let's just say, for example, particularly sensitive or contentious item that is not felt appropriate for officers to be deciding, then there is the ability to call a meeting to deal with that, which obviously we would consider on a case-by-case basis. But other than that, Chair, I just to add really that in terms of the hybrid solution, as and when that is in place, then the precautionary measures that we're currently operating in terms of hand sanitizer and advising face masks would continue to apply. But other than that, Chair, that's for members to decide which of the 2 options Council would prefer to have, and I'm happy to take any questions there may be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. Do I have any speakers on this item, please? Councillor Cagle, Fred.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got some questions. Now, my questions are in relation to not just Honiton, but also Exmouth Town Hall. And Exmouth Town Hall, is it the officer's intention to work Exmouth Town Hall under the same conditions as what Henry's just put forward there?
Thank you, Fred. Henry, could you answer that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So no, the intention was to apply it to Blackdown. The costing that has been obtained, which gives us the indicative budgetary figure of around 40, is based solely on Blackdown House. So no, the intention had not been Exmouth. If members wish us to investigate Exmouth as an option and make budgetary accommodation accordingly, happy to do that. But yes, at this moment, the intention is solely for Blackdown.
Could I now come back? Could I come back, Chair?
Briefly, by all means, Fred.
Yeah, okay, right. Well, the reason I'm asking is because obviously Exmouth Town Council meeting Exmouth Town Hall as tenants. Now, the very difficulty of Exmouth Town Hall as tenants is that we're not getting the service that we pay for. Because when the Town Hall was refurbished back in 2018, there was a new tenancy agreement delivered to the Town Council where there will be a 6-monthly tenants forum. But since that new agreement was set up with the Town Council, not one of those tenants forums have taken place. The Exmouth Town Council pay £50,000 per annum. 17,000 is one part of the charge. 25% management charge is £22,000, and £11,000 in business rates amounts to about £50,000. Now, if Exmouth Town Council are paying £50,000, yet we can't service our customers, the general public, and yet the rules relating to COVID measures that Henry's just outlined are going to be different, it really doesn't add up. So how are we going to have customers being able to be serviced at Exmouth Town Hall when we're not opening any of the doors? We're not actually allowing a basis on what Henry's saying about Honiton, about meetings, yet Exmouth Town Council with 25 members can meet fully in a council chamber without wearing masks, without any specific rules around hand or testing. So, you know, there's a little bit of difference of standards here, and it does give me some concern in that we're working to different standards. Now, the rest of the world has opened up, you know, and you can go in the pub, you can go in the theatre, You can go into Marks and Spencer's in Exeter, you know, and people and staff are quite happily going around with no masks. Yes, I choose to wear a mask at all sorts of occasions for my own personal reasons. And I would wear a mask in any of the council meetings if I chose to do so. But it should be now given the option to people to actually go back to working as normal, because everything else is working as normal. So what's different about East Devon District Council compared to all the other district councils and county council? Please, I'd like to know what that is. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. I'm not sure the situation of Exmouth Town Hall and its relationship as a tenant is necessarily something for us to pick up this evening, but I noticed that Mark's put his hand up. So Mark, would you like to comment on that here briefly, and then we'll try and get back onto the subject in hand?
Yes, so I concur with your comments there, Chair, but just for Fred's information, myself and Tim Child did have a meeting this afternoon with Lisa, the town clerk, where she expressed a number of concerns and also a variety of sort of potential options regarding the town hall. So we have provided some information to Lisa, and she's also gone back to work on an updated statement of need in terms of the town council's requirements for operating out of the town hall. And when we have that, then we'll sit down some more and work out an appropriate way forward.
Very much, Mark. So we'll come back to that one, Fred, at a later date, if that's okay. Councillor Ranger, Val.
Thank you. So I am for option 1A for all the benefits laid out in paragraph 5 of the report, which covers a whole range of things. What hybrid means at the moment, if we voted for hybrid, is a return to rules set up in 1972, 50 years out of date. It skews the whole voting system, and it favours an older demographic of people who are free to attend meetings night and day. And it favours those who live near Honiton, obviously, not so much, they don't have to do that long haul over, for example, from Exmouth to Honiton. It breaches equality, in my opinion, given that for all the reasons I've just stated, you know, only certain people still can vote at that meeting. And I think COVID aside, and there are very good reasons, COVID reasons, that we need to be careful, but COVID aside, it's time that councils took a stand and continue to lobby for proper full remote hybrid meetings with voting. And when you can vote, then that will truly be a hybrid meeting. And I would be all for it, where you can vote whether if you're on a committee, you can vote whether you're there or not. At the moment, you know, the public's attending, we're getting much better attendance from councillors. All meetings can be, because they're recorded, they can be viewed at any point. And I think the issue about Exmouth Town Council being open for members of the public, that is a separate issue. But in terms of things at the moment, there is no equality whatsoever in hybrid meetings for all the reasons that I have outlined. So that's the point that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. Councillor Bailey, Jess.
Hi, thank you very much. Just following on from Councillor Ranger, I 100% agree with everything Councillor Ranger has said. Hybrid is not hybrid. Hybrid is the worst of everything, I think. I think we should carry on with our remote meetings. If we want to be inclusive and equitable, we need to make it easy for our members to attend. And I just cannot bear the thought of being forced to being so restricted. And it's much more difficult for some of us who have childcare commitments to be bound by trundling into Blackdown House in the way that we used to, and setting aside all of the COVID implications, it's better. It's much, much better. And I also think that, like Councillor Ranger, we should be lobbying for change. And just today on Twitter, you know, Mumsnet are really pressing for remote meetings because it is more democratic and it enables more people to participate. So, you know, until you can vote in hybrid, it's not really hybrid. Thank you. So I'll go for option 1. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess. Councillor Rowland. Jack.
Thank you. I won't repeat all the fantastic points that have been made by Councillor Ranger and Bailey, but I will add a further couple of points as well, because I am in favour of option 1. And I think when you look at the fact that this is a much greener issue in terms of saving on travelling and, not least, reducing the expenses that councillors claim for travelling time. That's an important aspect of this as well. And with the hybrid option, we're talking about £40,000 being spent on additional IT structure, which, as I understand it, is hopefully coming from savings in the capital expenditure budget for this year. I'd rather, if there is any savings to be made on that or underspend, I think there are more valid reasons for spending £40,000 to help residents in some way, rather than coming up with a new structure that I think this should, as we are carrying on at the moment, be the new normal. I've heard that everything else is returning to normal. I'm not quite sure what that means in some respects. I understand about access to theatres, sporting events, shopping centres and the like, but for all the benefits that these meetings have virtually, I think this should be the new normal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. Councillor Key. David.
Thank you, Chair. Well, where do I start? I mean, the thing is, Councillor Brown and myself, we actually have 11 parishes, and we are at the moment meeting in small halls. I don't think there's any of the halls that are actually big. We're sitting spaced, very safe, and I cannot see a problem. Now, we've already had 3 planning meetings in Blackdown House, which, I mean, surely, I mean, Blackdown House can probably cope with 20 people, well spaced there, and a lot of the committees would probably not even be that. I mean, if there's any of the public, well, then they would have to correspond with the Zoom that we're doing now. But I honestly cannot understand why. I mean, I appreciate there's vulnerable people. I've had COVID. I've had my 4th injection. I'm quite happy. I'm the same as some of them. I wear a mask whenever I go into a shop for my own safety. A lot of people don't. I couldn't care a monkeys about them. I look after myself. I just cannot understand why we are still using the Zoom method for small meeting or small gatherings when we could be actually in person and making our own decisions, not leaving it to somebody else to make a decision. Whether they take our views or not is a different matter. But I really cannot understand why these people are so frightened of actually getting back to a meeting. If they only saw 1 or 2 of the halls that we actually made, these people can wear the masks, that's not a problem. But I really cannot understand why we are still being, you know, sort of using the Zoom system. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Councillor Desarum. Bruce.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Chair. I have a very quick question, to yourself and to Henry. You may recall I wrote to you about a week or so ago about the situation that was in Torbay, because members may not be aware that a couple of weeks ago, Torbay put out a press release because they were going to be considering, and I use the considering because it's not gone ahead, a hybrid form of meetings. And I did send that to you, that email, Chair, and you were going to investigate with Henry. I'd be grateful to know if you've been able to follow this up with Henry, because I think that it did put very positive points across for why we should go hybrid. So obviously, I'd like to know whether you followed it up, and thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Henry, do you want to comment on that? You received that as well?
Well, only that it's pretty reflective of what's being proposed under option 2.
Yeah, no, that's actually correct. So it is very much the same as proposed under option 2 here, Bruce.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you.
No problem. Next, I've got Councillor Gazzard. Steve.
Oops. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. Firstly, can I say that I fully endorse what Councillor Cahill has said about Exmouth Town Hall. I'm absolutely appalled with what's going on and the way that Exmouth Town Council is being treated by the District Council. And I hope it's going to be resolved fairly quickly. But on tonight's issue, I'm afraid I'm probably in a minority, but I can't agree to either option. I really do think we need to get back to face-to-face meetings. And I apologise for saying this now, and I couldn't get to the other meeting because I had a hospital appointment, so I couldn't get there. And I would have said it there. But I do think it's time, nearly 3 years on, that we should be getting back face-to-face, and members should be taking the decisions. We should move away now from delegated responsibility and get back to what we used to have before. Councillors make the decisions, and that is that. I mean, we're being told, aren't we, by central government, irrespective of what you think about central government, that we're moving on. Well, we don't appear to be moving on in East Devon. We seem to be staying with, if you like, status quo. So unfortunately, tonight, I can't support either option, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I mean, you do have the option, if you wish, of proposing an amendment of a third option, which is basically all back in the room. The reason it didn't feature on the papers here, which reflect directly the consultative and participation meeting that we had as an open discussion of members, and there was very little favour for that particular alternative, which is obviously why it wasn't included here. But as this is obviously a separate meeting, if you wish to propose it as an amendment, we could deal with it as such, and it's entirely up to you. Or if you want us just to move on, I'm happy to take the next speaker.
Well, I'd like to move then, Chair, if I get a seconder, that we go back to face-to-face meetings.
I'll second that.
Sorry, I missed that. Who's?
It's Councillor Brown.
Okay, right. Well, we're going to be talking to a third alternative and amendment then. Councillor Brown, do you want to say anything in support of this?
Yes, please. Do you mind if I don't turn my camera on, because my internet is not the best in the world where I am, even though I'm only sort of yards away from the council offices. But hopefully in 2 months' time we get Jurassic Fibre, which will be good. Hopefully,
we can always set you up a desk there in the foyer, Colin, if you needed it.
Thank you very much.
If you'd like to second the
I'd like to second that proposal. Yes, option 3. The Conservative group feels strongly that we should return to the chamber at Blackdown House, meet face to face in future, and reopen the front desks in Honiton and Exmouth. East Devon District Council is one of the few councils still not meeting in person, with local councils across Devon, including towns and parish councils, returning to face-to-face meetings. The council administration can't suggest that they are strapped for cash and then even consider splashing out up to £40,000 to continue with virtual meetings. The public won't wear their taxpayers' cash being spent to keep councillors working from home when the vast majority have returned to the office. That said, if the council does not come to the right decision tonight, it helps me write my election leaflet and adds to the growing list of decisions which the public will rightly question. Not only do we need to return to the office, but we also need to be open and accountable to the public. Keeping the offices at Blackdown House and Exmouth Town Hall closed to the public is not only letting our communities down, but also impacts on businesses who rely on lunchtime trade. COVID cases have been dropping across the district. There's no acceptable excuse not to meet in person and get staff back into the offices. Look at what happened with the recent planning application. We risked the reputation and damage of that happening again if we don't go back. Local people are starting to think we are somehow superior to them, and they are increasingly feel distant from their district council. They've returned to work in supermarkets, pubs, cafes, offices and businesses. We should do. I hope members will vote to return to normality like the rest of society. And if we go to a vote on any of these options, I would like a recorded vote, please.
Thank you very much. Well, just to remind members at this point, we are speaking on an amendment to introduce a third alternative, which is basically to go everything back in the room as per pre-COVID. So I'm only really looking for speakers specifically on that step at the moment, please. If you want to speak on that, so if you don't want to speak, I haven't seen most names, and you will get a chance to speak on the main motion or the main decision later if indeed this isn't taken as a favoured objective. So anybody wanting to speak specifically on the all back in the room pre-COVID option as proposed?
Yes, Chair, I would like to. Councillor.
I've got you, Tom. I do have a lot of speakers. You're on the grid on about the third row at the moment, if that's all right. I've got Councillor Miller. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I can't keep up, Chair, with the Conservative group's position on this issue. We had a briefing, a private briefing, and the consensus from the Conservative group certainly was that we would go the hybrid route. And now suddenly the Conservative group have completely changed their mind and want to go back. And I think it would be a retrograde step, by the way, of all of us crowded into a room again. I find it bizarre as well that the Conservative group should propose or should second. I completely respect Councillor Gazzard's individual view, but for the leader of the Conservative group to make this a political issue, I think is wrong. For me, it's a conscience issue, and I won't actually be going with 1A. I'll be going for 1B, and I know that most of the colleagues on my side of the chamber, so to speak, will be probably going for 1A. But one reason I will be going for 1B is because I do think we've got to get back to some form of face-to-face. And I think every single meeting but full council, none of that presents a difficulty, because you know the members not in the committee don't need to vote anyway and can attend virtually. So I do hope common sense will prevail in the end and we'll go for 1B. But I personally cannot believe we're even considering even voting on a complete return to the old ways of everybody having to travel. All I can say is, as a councillor, I know this has been said before by other colleagues, my participation as a councillor, my development as a councillor has been significantly improved by us being able to meet virtually. I would not have, like many colleagues I know, working colleagues, I would not have been able to have attended so many meetings had it not been for for these virtual meetings. And I think they should continue to a certain extent. So I'm sorry to say I won't be voting for this amendment, and I hope we can get back to the debate on the main motion, because I think that debate on the main motion is an issue I'd also like to speak on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Eileen, on the amendment, please, specifically.
Yeah, well, it's been referred to that there were 3 planning meetings. I chaired 2 of those, and I spent my time looking at the screen. Complete waste of time, face-to-face. More public attend. We've seen that. The numbers have gone up by virtual meetings. And as for spending money, we'd spend a lot more in travel claims and travelling many miles. And don't forget as well, this council voted to lower its carbon neutral target. Well, we're not going to achieve that, are we, in the time scale promised if we're going to add to the pollution in the environment? So I will have another comment to make, but it's not actually, well, I don't see why I can't make it now. There was a planning decision that was referred to. Now, that could have been the one where we made the site visit last week. Now, just to briefly recap, there was a planning application, retrospective, for a compressor and shop blaster to operate in an AONB. The planning committee at the virtual meeting proposed refusal of that application, which was dire, because it was obvious the scientific data was there which would back an approval. So it went to officers. Officers refused to sign that refusal of that application, and good for them that they did. I've not known of any other decision, certainly not in planning, where officers have refused to back members. So a site visit, they sent it back to committee. A site visit was held, which you were present at, Chair, last Monday last week. And it was obvious there, we were straining our ears to hear any noise. And so that was unanimously, I think it was unanimously approved. Now, had that not been in a virtual meeting, the refusal would have gone ahead. The applicant would inevitably have appealed, and that appeal would have been won. And it would have involved, no doubt, this council paying compensation. So it has that effect as well. So, Chair, I shan't be back in face-to-face meetings. It's archaic. No wonder they call this a Jurassic Coast.
Sorry to interrupt you, Eileen, but I do want to get it right back onto the specific question of whether there's going to be the introduction of a third option, which is all back in the room effectively the pre-COVID situation. So please, would speakers please be brief and keep to that, because I do want to get us back onto the main area so we can come to a decision with within a reasonable period of time this evening.
With respect, I was just putting the other side as to why we shouldn't go back to face-to-face meetings.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Noted. Councillor Pook, Jeff.
Thank you. I started off this meeting, having read the papers, very much in favour of the hybrid meetings, because I do believe that we do need to get to a degree of it being face-to-face meetings again. However, Councillor Ranger actually changed my mind, because I think if we agree to hybrid meetings as we've got them, we're with still having the decision being am I correct in that the decision will still be a recommendation? The decision will still be taken.
No, sorry, you're not correct, Councillor Pook. What would happen actually? The position would be that the committee members would be in the room, and they're obviously the only ones who can vote anyway. And the committee members then would vote, and as they were in the room under the 1972 Act, that would count as being a decision-making body. So they would actually be making the decision in the room.
So the committee members would be in the room, but so as Councillor Ranger said, it's not really a hybrid meeting. It's going back to face-to-face meetings with the whole lot could be there. So I think we should actually stand back and sort of say, well, no, we need to have proper hybrid meetings where a voting member can be either in the room or away from remotely, and it can still be a decision. But I do think we need to have the hybrid. We need to have meetings so that public can come to a meeting, and those who favour having face-to-face, because sometimes you can put your argument better face-to-face, there is the option of having those hybrid meetings, but they've got to be proper hybrid meetings. So if we just stick now and we accept that a hybrid meeting is hybrid only insofar as people can watch it, but the actual vote is taken by those there, I agree with Councillor Ranger. It's not a hybrid meeting, and we might never get to the 21st century, which we should be in, and have proper hybrid meetings where we are saving transport, more people are attending, and you just get better representation throughout. So reluctantly, I'm going to say no to the hybrid meetings as they stand, and stick to the meetings as we are now, but use that as a big stick to push that we really need to have true hybrid meetings. I think I've made that right now anyway. Thank you, bye.
I understood. Thank you very much, Jeff. Again, to the amendment, please, Ollie. I really do want to get this amendment either in or out pretty quickly now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for keeping us on track, Chair. This is my third meeting today. I had meetings at 10, 2 and 6. Now, in between, I've been able to visit the Camperdown depot to take a key back. I've been to the town hall. I've been into 3 shops. I'm not frightened of COVID, although we do have to remember that people are still catching it. My wife's just informed me only 200 people a day are now dying of COVID, so that's all right then. And those who I know have caught COVID have assured me that it's best avoided. Councillor Gazzard has suggested we should be moving on. We have moved on. We are embracing the 21st century technology that actually was around in the 20th century. This is moving on. It is moving on, and we're not going back to normal. There is no back to normal. It's the new normal. And it's a normal where we wear face masks a lot more frequently than we used to. We're a lot more cautious about our contacts than we used to be. And we're a lot more aware of other people's health than we used to be. So I don't think that there's some idea that we can suddenly turn the clock back. So I am very happy to continue with virtual meetings. I think they're far more efficient. They cut our carbon footprint enormously. And I have absolutely no desire to crowd back into a room with other councillors just because the government couldn't be bothered to extend the legislation. So I am firmly in favour of remaining with virtual meetings, and I commend this council actually for sticking with virtual meetings, because I think we are an example, and we should be flagging this up to the LGA to say we are a council who's taken the decision to continue doing this, and it would be a big help if the government would actually enable us to do so in a legitimate way so that we don't have to delegate those decisions to senior officers, but can actually make the decisions as we could during the first stage of the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Ollie. Councillor Wright, Tom. To the amendment, please. I really do want to put to bed whether we're having
Chair,
this alternative or not.
I thought I'd lowered my hand, so you can ignore me for this part of the meeting, Chair. Thank you.
I would never ignore you, Tom. You know that. Councillor Young, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. I would not support the amendment. I think this discussion is similar to what people had about horse and carts and vehicles about 100 years ago. We've actually found a better way of having our meetings. It's it's greener, it's more efficient, it's better attended, and most important, it's more inclusive. So no, it's no brainer. We stick to what we have now experiencing and go with the flow and with modern technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Councillor Faithful, Peter, to the amendment, please, if we could.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm trying to stick to the amendment. I do support, in some respects, the amendment, but I do think we should fall back to the option for people who maybe can't get there. That includes members of the public. So we have a stick with the virtual meeting, but I do support what the amendment is aiming for. So I'm not sure I'm actually supporting it fully, but I do support what their principle is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter. Councillor Jackson. Sarah, to the amendment, please. Seem to have lost Councillor Jackson. I'll come back to her. Councillor Key. David, have you spoken to the first bit? Could you speak to the amendment specifically, please?
Yes, I mean, I would, oh.
Sorry, carry on, David, I can hear you.
Oh, right, sorry, my screen went blank and that I thought I was cut off. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I mean, I just cannot understand. They're saying, oh, you know, we're going back in time. We're not, we're going ahead in time. What's the matter with these people? Are they frightened of actually meeting? I appreciate the fact when you have a full council, no, that could not be held in Blackdown House because it's not big enough that people would be too close. But every other meeting, as I said before, there's limited numbers to it and could be held in there. One thing I would like to pick up with Councillor Miller is the fact that he said that the Conservatives voted for it. I think he's got to get his facts right because I have never voted for Zoom meetings. I have always voted for face-to-face meetings.
I didn't say that.
Yes, you did.
Excuse me.
No, I
Excuse
did
me.
The Conservatives.
Gentlemen, please.
You said the Conservatives voted
Councillor Key,
for...
would you please desist? I will have to do a metaphorical standing up if people persist on talking, and you wouldn't want to see my jeans underneath here. So if we can agree to park it at that point, please, then we can move on. See, that's
if you're wearing jeans, that's a relief, Chair.
Yes, I'm going to make no quip at all because I wouldn't want to cause anybody any embarrassment. So, Councillor Desaran, please briefly to the motion. I think I'm going to bring this to a vote.
We're back. We all know we're bound by legislation which requires us to attend. The planning process clearly works face to face, as we saw. Our own esteemed mayor has seen the benefits and is encouraging, and we don't rely on the internet because of issues of connectivity. And I agree with what Councillor Key said about the full council. So, for those reasons, I'm happy to propose support Councillor Brown's original thoughts. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Well, I think what we're at, thanks, Bruce. I think I get what you mean, but we were actually, it was Councillor Gazzard that had proposed a third amendment, third alternative, which is basically a full return to normal. And that was what we're actually talking on the moment. Bruce has spoken. Councillor Howe, Mike, if we could make it brief, please, Mike.
I'll make it very quick and brief. I won't be supporting this. And I would like it to be put to the vote, please.
Excellent. Now, is everybody happy we go to the vote on this one? Because you will get the chance to speak on the main thing. But what I'd like to do is first the motion or the amendment is that the third alternative is included, which is basically a full return to pre-COVID situation of in-the-room meetings. We've got a proposer. Well, I'll second that so we can move straight to that. If we could have a vote on this, please, that would say, I would like green ticks if you agree to it being included as a third alternative, or red crosses for not, please. So it's green ticks to include it, red cross to not to do so, please.
Okay, Chair, we have 13 green ticks in favour and 35 red crosses.
Thank you very much. I think that means that thank you for putting the amendments, Councillor Gaza. I do appreciate it, but I think that again reflects the feeling from the consultative meeting, and that's comprehensively defeated. So we're back to the substantive proposition, which is the 1A on the continuing with the current arrangements, option 1, or 1B, moving to the hybrid situation as presented in option 2. Now taking speakers on the main two, please. Councillor Howe, you've snuck back in again. You were so brief. Are you going to be brief again?
I'm not going to be so brief this time, but at least we've got the first part out of the way. Right, I am very supportive of 1B, quite simply. I do believe we are acting outside the law, or at least bending the law, I suppose is the best way we can put it. And if we are that concerned with doing our jobs, then we should be able to follow the law to do it. There is a simple line in 3AI, which is right in the middle. and it is Henry's usual brilliant work that he's done, but shall be on the basis of being consultative. So we are not making any decisions. We cannot make any decisions if we choose A. At least with B, we can make decisions. And if we're not making any decisions, then should we be getting our pay as we are? I don't believe we should be, quite simply, because we're not doing our job. We should be doing our job. We should be meeting in a safe way that we can until the law is changed. And let's face it, otherwise this is going to come back in October and the law won't have changed. It's quite blatant the law won't have changed. We are standing out like a sore thumb, and I just wonder how long until government decides to send their people in to look at us and go, well, you're not doing anything, you're not doing your jobs, why are you here almost? Which is another critical question. But we've got to get back to some normality. Only some. We've got to do it in a safe and secure way. The public's participation would not be altered by the hybrid method. And the thought of not spending the money seems ridiculous to me, because we should have done it anyway in the first place when Blackdown House was built. We need to be more inclusive. We needed to be more progressive with our meetings. And of course, option B does away with 90% of the meetings anyway. It is only the main decision-making bodies that have to meet in limited numbers. So I fully support 1B, and I hope I get a supporter. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mike. I'm going to take a body of those who want to speak now, because we've narrowed it down to the original choice. Councillor Bonetta, Jake.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of speak on all of this and agree with my colleague, Councillor Miller, actually, in support of option 2, sort of section 1B in this report. I think the conversations that we've been having really whittle down to a fundamental difference in opinion here at the council, and that difference is conservative and progressive. And I think that is really key. Many of the Conservative members here, obviously we just heard that 13 members voted for trying to stay virtual, want to go back to where we were, want to go back in time. And we even heard from Colin Brown, Councillor Colin Brown, that he is against spending the money to go hybrid and allow our meetings to be recorded or shown to the public virtually. I'm more than welcome for him to come back and say that's not the case. However, if that is the case, that is, to me, a dire reduction in democracy. The Houses of Parliament have been televised now since the 90s, and other councils across the country, up and down, including our own town and parish councils in this district, have virtual access for members of the public to see. For me, the progressive side is about moving forward, about seeing what the best way is for us as a council post-COVID to work in a safe environment. And I completely sympathise with all moves to be completely virtual in that sense. However, I do obviously heed to the limitations of the Local Government Act as is. Of course, we are not breaking the law. I do agree with Councillor how we are bending it. However, I'm not overly sure to what extent, but with the dispensation we've been given, that should be fine. However, I will go back to the point that I made, and I think only I made, in our informal briefing the other day. The staff must matter as well. We've got a head of paid service, the chief executive, who is working on a programme to bring staff back into the office near the end of this month and going into the future. The councillors can't stay virtual if the staff are expected to slowly move back into the office. We've got to move at the same pace as the paid service, and it would be completely wrong of us to treat ourselves as different from them. And therefore, I think on those 2 points, I would be in support of option 1B. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jake. Councillor Arnott, Paul.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've listened with great interest to all of the speeches here. I suppose, if you'll forgive me, if I'm awarding the gold medal for today, I go to the first speech made by Val Ranger, Councillor Ranger, which I think set out the crucial key matters, and then followed quite quickly by Councillor Bailey. So this is a progressive council, and I'm grateful for Councillor Bonetta for pointing that out. It is majority a progressive group of people, and the Conservative group is not. Let us just remember why we are here. We are here because just as the Conservative government owe us 1.6 million for LED, and frankly, they're just not going to pay it. They're going to welch. Just as promises were made about that, promises were made at the beginning of the pandemic and throughout that there would be reform of the way in which local government worked and the way in which meetings could work. And guess what? Jacob Rees-Mogg, dozing on the front benches, leaving the office in his sedan chair, accompanied by his butlers, he just fancies carrying on meeting himself. The LGA, which is from all party backgrounds, has begged the government, legislate for this, think about it, do something, but they haven't. We have asked our MPs to help us, or MP, as we now have. There's one we can't appeal to anymore, and they've done nothing, and their view was whipped. Their view was whipped absolutely in the discussions we had with them, which was, no, we don't agree with this. And that was a long time ago. That was in the middle of the pandemic. So I think we have to, it's a question of what people mean by moving forward. Moving forward, to me, the key word was used by Councillor Ranger. It is about equality, equalities. I mean, there are protected characteristics of people here. We have mothers and parents. We have people who aren't well as well. Now, this situation has benefited their access immensely. It's one of the few silver linings of this ghastly pandemic. And I would also say, I hear this thing that we're not making decisions. We are making decisions. My God, we're making decisions. Can I ask you, Conservative councillors, what do you think we're doing now? We're about to take a vote as a council. It's incredibly disappointing that the Conservative members come here with a press release ready to read out as the opening contribution from their leader. You know, I think the rest of us have been sitting here listening, and I expect to see that word for word regurgitated in a bulletin going out after this meeting. They will represent themselves as the Democrats. They are not. They are the people who have failed to grasp this moment. I agree, I suppose, instinctively with those who are commending the hybrid option 1B. I can see that. I'd love to have voted for Councillor Cazard's motion. I'd love to be back in the room. I mean, you know, I think Councillor, what did Councillor Key say? What are these people scared of? What's the matter with these people? Well, his other quote was, I couldn't give a monkeys about them. I look after myself. So it's been quite a memorable night for quotes. We haven't had kneecapping again, but we've had those. And I think that sums up a certain...
Can we move on, Councillor Arnott, please?
So I'll bring this to a conclusion, Chair, which is I really like the sound of 1B, but at the moment, because it excludes people being able to vote, I can't back it. We need to thrash this ball back over the net to the government. Frankly, it may be a different government by October anyway. All we're being asked to vote for at 1A is to carry on with an end date of the 31st of October 2022. I have absolutely no doubt that you, Chair, and the monitoring officer and the portfolio holder and other councillors will continue to discuss how we can make these things work and possible. But at the moment, we're not ready to do it. And so for that reason, Chair, I don't know if anybody has proposed it. No, I better not. I'm the leader. I'll let somebody else propose 1A. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I would like to hear the speakers that are indicated already, if we could, before we go to the vote on that. Councillor Jackson, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies for last time you called me. I dropped my mouse, which was very silly of me, so I couldn't unmute. For the most part, what I wanted to say is against these recommendations. I only had a very short comment on the previous amendment, so I'm not too worried about that either. So for me, this is about more than a pandemic. I think we've learned an awful lot in the last 2.5 years or so about how we could be operating and how, frankly, the 21st century operates. I don't see this as trying to get back to normal, quote unquote. I see this as actually catching up to the here and now with the way the world operates now. This is a new normal. We've been functioning well as a council, operating through virtual meetings. We've seen huge benefits in terms of democratic engagement, and I do mean participation. I'm very aware that large meetings that we would have to undertake in person which we'd have to do anyway, are unfortunately, at the moment, by the sounds of it, the best we will be able to do, even with a hybrid system in place, would be to live stream them. And that's not the same thing. So if you were to participate in a meeting on the other side of the district, for example, from Axminster, I'm at one end, Axminster at another, as an example, actually you are impacting those residents and also councillors who might not be able to get to the other end of the district to speak. They may be able to watch a live stream, but they wouldn't have the opportunity to dial in and speak virtually. And so I think it's really important that wherever possible, we continue virtually until such a time as a hybrid option is available, whereby people who are not in the room can also vote. Otherwise, it's discriminatory. And frankly, I'm in a situation right now, I'm very lucky to have made it back to East Devon to participate tonight. But had my plans been as they originally were, I would have been in Cornwall and simply wouldn't have been able to participate at all. There are other occasions where I might be overseas or in another part of the country for work. As many other people, working professionals that we have in our council may be, or may not be able to get back to East Devon to participate. So this actually is a far more inclusive, continuing with a virtual meeting enables people, whether they're residents or councillors, to contribute. And I'm not overly concerned about the costs involved for getting a hybrid system in place, because I think ultimately, once the government catches up and facilitates us to do that, we will need to hit the ground running, and that will mean we need to have that technology in place. So in that respect, I almost see that as a secondary issue, a future-proofing exercise. But I think our focus really right now should be about improving democratic engagement, participation, being a champion for equal opportunities, as well as facilitating engagement for members of the public. And that in itself, the improvement in residents being able to tune in, contribute, just listen, that in itself is more open and accountable than we have ever been as a council. We can't ignore that. To return to a system where you can't do that is not a forward step at all. That's a backward step. So let's get with the programme. Let's catch up. Business has been doing this for a very long time, and our MPs and central government, many of which run their own businesses, have been doing this in their private enterprises. So we need to catch up and get with the programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Councillor Loudon. John.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to address just one aspect of the debate here, and that's the fallacy around the fact that we're not acting democratically. And it is Groundhog Day again, isn't it? Because we just keep going around and round, having the same debate, and it is very much, two tribes here taking positions, and that's sad because I think Councillor Miller was talking earlier on about doing it out of conscience rather than doing it out of political stance, and I align myself with those views. So the argument's been made we're not acting democratically because we're not making any decisions, and because we're not making decisions, we shouldn't be getting paid. I mean, put aside the issue of money, that's not the nub of it. The issue is, are we or are we not, as the council, day by day, making decisions? And the answer is plainly, of course we are. We come together, we discuss, we debate, we argue, we make decisions, we actually take some votes. Now, the issue is, are we or are we not able to enact those ourselves? Well, the answer is clearly not, because the 72 law doesn't allow us to do it in the way we're sat here now, in our own homes, etc., participating. So what we do is we make the decision, having debated it, and we then say to our officers, please, will you take this away and will you enact it for us? So instead of us putting our signature on the bottom of the paper, we have an officer do that. Well, they are working in partnership with us. We have been doing this for 26 months. How many times have these officers gone away and ripped up our recommendations and acted in a rogue way and trampled across democracy? How many times? I think it was once, wasn't it? And I think Chair of Planning talked about that earlier on. Wow, oh dear. That doesn't seem to me to be flying in the face of democracy. We are making decisions, and we are all, well, I see one of our colleagues nodding ahead against that. Well, I don't know what you call this if it's not participating in democracy. Just because we sit in the same room with our bums on the seats in the same room doesn't mean it's democracy. Democracy is debating and making decisions, and we are asking our officers to sign that bit of paper instead of us putting the signature on it. What's the difference? I don't get it. I'm sorry. So I don't actually support the argument that we are being anti-democratic, and I look forward to seeing Councillor Brown's leaflets next year when he makes the argument for all of this being anti-democratic, and he and his colleagues being the stalwarts of democracy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Loudon. Councillor Miller, you have spoken once, I know, but if you could be very brief, please. And obviously we're speaking on the two alternatives now.
Well, thanks, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to second Councillor Howe's proposal for 1B, although I won't endorse what he said about councillors, not getting their allowance anymore because we're not making the decisions. It's a conscience issue. I just wanted to briefly read out a statement from Unison, that was the trade union that was sent to me, because at the start of this debate, Councillor Ranger said that the staffing issue coming back to the offices and council offices weren't related to councillors having meetings physically, and I would tend to disagree with that. Unison said Unison is always on the side of equal opportunities and inclusion for all, and under this we would definitely like to see the opening up of the council offices for members of the public, if only for those more vulnerable clients. However, is it right to make staff go back to the office if councillors are still reluctant to have the meeting in the same building? And that's why I've come, and it's a conscience decision, that I'll be opting for 1B. It shouldn't be party political, and I hope we move to the vote shortly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. I've got 6 speakers who haven't spoken directly against, and one more, and I'm going to close it at that point if we could, but I ask that each could be brief and obviously not repeat previously made points. Councillor Gardner. Kathy.
I was going to ask that the vote be put.
I'd still like to persist for the sake of completeness, working with the ones we've got actually indicated. Councillor Faithful, briefly, you have spoken before. If you could speak quickly, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I haven't spoken on this. I spoke on the previous one, but I will just go back briefly. I do think it's time we had up-to-date technology. So I don't have a problem with us spending the money. Some of us were looking at us needing up-to-date technology when we were back at Sidmouth. I support the principle of the previous alternative that we decided not to have, but I reiterate, I think we should have the technology available. I've had meetings in Overview before where we were having guests coming in from the other end of the country, and I think they should be included without having to make them from Manchester or God knows where coming in for our meetings. They should be able to do it virtually. Same with the public. So we should have the technology there, but I think we should be going back as much as we can to proper face-to-face meetings with the option for people who feel for whatever reason they can't get to it. I know we've got to get there gradually and get there in progress. So I guess we're talking about 1B. I really think we should be making an effort to make progress. Those who want to lobby central government about their issue, fine, go and have your lobby against central government if you want to do that and you really believe in that. But what we have to deal with is where we are right now. And where we are right now is what the law says. So there you go. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter. Councillor Wright, Chris, please.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me, I'm losing my voice. Councillor Loudon actually really hit the nail on the head for me, and I've been sat waiting patiently to ask the question. If we're not making decisions, how many of these recommendations haven't actually then been carried through by officers? That is clearly making decisions, and it is on a trust basis we have with the officers that they're undertaking the recommendations coming forward from these people being my fellow councillors here tonight. So I think as a council, we're incredibly progressive. Pre-COVID, we were given technology, which I'm talking to you on tonight from work, my iPad. This is a step forward. We must continue to move forward. Days of everybody having to be sat in a room, they're gone. They are gone. And if we believe that that's still the case, being sat in small rooms, that is a thing of the past, I'm afraid. We may be on the Jurassic coast, but we should not be dinosaurs, and we need to move on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chris. Eileen, you have spoken before. If you could make it brief, please, for me.
Yes, I will. That in the Constitution, it does say that the senior planning officer will make a decision in consultation with the chair. So it was always that way. It was the senior officer would consult with the chair. And I think it's worth making that point, because that's a little bit of a loophole, perhaps. And the other thing is the staff who I know work at EDDC don't want to return to the office to work. They're happy with things as they are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Councillor Johns, Vicky, same guidance as normal, please.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm going to got a couple of points to make. Firstly, I think if we go back to physical meetings, we're going to end up with a two-tier council. Those councillors that are free to attend meetings whenever and wherever. And we're going to have those that can't attend, either because they're poorly, they've got disabilities, they can't drive, they've got work commitments, they've got childcare commitments, etc. So I think we'll end up with a two-tier council. Secondly, we've got the environmental issues, which we've all turned around and said that we've declared a climate emergency, but that doesn't seem to take much part in a lot of these discussions that we're having. I know that few people have made that point. We've also cut down on the amount of allowances that we're paying because people are using their facilities from home, so that must make a big change. We need to take into account the staff. That's one of the most important things. You know, the way that things are being run at the moment, I know that a lot of councils are struggling to hire staff. However, if we've got a more inclusive council where staff can work from home, which helps with childcare issues, because I know of lots of people that if they've had COVID, they get paid. However, if their children get COVID, they cannot go to school, but the parents won't get paid because it's not them that's technically sick. So it takes that into account. The regulations for having to have face-to-face meetings were made in 1972. The World Wide Web was invented in 1989. So for the love of God, surely we should move on. You know, everybody else has managed to move on, but no, we're still stuck in the 70s. I wasn't even born when these regulations were brought out. How ridiculous is that? And another very important point to make is it was pointed out earlier by certain councillors that, you know, we could be breaking the law, etc., etc. Firstly, I can't imagine that our monitoring officer would allow that to happen. So I think it's very disrespectful to turn around and say something like that in the first place when Henry has always kept us on the straight and narrow. That is his job and he's very good at it. Secondly, North Yorkshire County Council are still meeting virtually. The majority of councillors at North Yorkshire County Council are Tories. They are still meeting virtually and they're happy to do so. Their stipulation is any formal decisions that the committee needs to make that are legally binding will be made in consultation with the Chief Executive Officer using his emergency delegated powers, taking into account the recommendations of the committee. So surely, if North Yorkshire County Council are happy to do it and are leading the way in that respect, I don't understand why as a district council we can't do the same thing. It makes the council more inclusive, not only for councillors, but members of the public and staff. So personally, I think that we should stick with virtual meetings because I think it's more inclusive and it shows the way. You know, at the end of the day, we're not in 1972 anymore. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Unfortunately, I must admit to have been born before 1972, but sadly, I remember the music and I won't remind any of my colleagues who were around at the time of the sort of music we were listening to either. Councillor Poot, Jeff, again, you've spoken once. If you could make it brief, Jeff, please.
Yeah, first of all, apologies for not speaking to the right issue the first motion the first time, not listening again. Just to reiterate basically what I'm saying, I think basically what we should be aiming for is the option of live meetings, because some people do like live meetings, and that's the public as well, and I think they are useful for certain things. But I think if we go to hybrid as we stand at the moment, we should be working to proper hybrid meetings so there can be a live meeting and people can votingly contribute either live or remotely. So I'll be flip-flopping a bit now and I'm not quite sure which way I'm going, but I think that's what we should be aiming for, the option of a live meeting, but for voting people to be able to vote live or remotely. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Now I've got Councillor Howe's definitely spoken at least once before. Helen, I'm afraid, sorry, Councillor Park, I did say I wasn't going to accept any additional speakers on this. So I've literally got three at the top to complete, if that's all right. My apologies, Helen. Councillor Howe, Mike, very brief, please.
Yeah,
very brief.
I will be very brief, but I just need to correct because a couple of councillors have said things that I don't believe are true. Councillor Arnott, to start with, we are not making decisions. It is in the first paragraph of what we are doing. Yes, our officers are very good at listening to our advice, and that's what it is, because it's clearly in the paperwork. It is advice to our officers and making the decision. And yes, quite rightly, they're not making any different decisions. Well, hardly any. So, you know, I agree partly, but the fundamental is we are not making a decision unless you want to change that stipulation and say we are making decisions, and see how I'd like to see Henry's advice with that. The second thing is Councillor Jackson made a good thing about participation. A hybrid does not stop the participation, of my understanding. Quite simply, the public can still dial in, they can still use Zoom, and it'll be part of the equation. So they can come and speak and everything else. I believe the hybrid way is the best on the cards at this minute in time to keep us lawful, to keep us safe, to keep the participation up, and to keep the miles and the economy or the green infrastructure going as well, because it balances everything out but keeps us, above all, fully legal and fully working. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Alistair, I know you did actually put hands up after that. I'd called the deadline, but I did note you'd put something on the chat function. And obviously, I don't particularly want members to be using the chat function in a public meeting like this. So I'll give you the opportunity to make, I assume, the point you made on the chat function. Alistair,
yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard this subject brought up at all through this whole debate, and that is the broadband speed that some of us suffer with in more rural areas. For instance, today, mine's varied from 0.6 to 1.6. It's currently 1.4. Now, if the meeting coincides when it's 0.6 or 0.9, it doesn't work for me. And in fact, I've had real trouble dialing in tonight. So please, let's bear that in mind, because as it stands at the moment, I don't have an option other than to vote for the hybrid. And I would have much preferred in-person meetings. So let's not ignore the fact that some of us really suffer with broadband. I know I've heard all the arguments and some of them are really good. I get the green bit completely and it works for a lot of people. But some of us, in order to discharge our obligation as councillors, are really struggling when it comes to Zoom meetings. So please just bear that in mind when you come to vote on these. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alistair. That's noted. From a personal experience, as members are aware, I do keep tactically disappearing from the meetings from time to time. Final speaker on this, Councillor Rowland. Jack, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think I applaud you in some respects for allowing so many speakers, but I think we have got to the stage where a lot of great points are being repeated. And I'd like to simply, although you were probably going to be doing this at this point, as I'm the last speaker, I was actually going to be formally moving that we go to the vote, please.
Well, you're going to formally move what I was going to formally move anyway at this point, as you probably recognise. We did, just so Councillor Brown doesn't feel I've forgotten him, he did actually propose a recorded vote earlier on in the process. So the question is whether there's a seconder for that recorded vote, please.
Chair, I thought that was in relation to his amendment.
I must admit I took it as being in, perhaps Councillor Brown would clarify. I must admit I took that in relation to the whole process.
I would like a recorded vote, please, yes.
Okay, so we'll confirm that proposal. I'll accept it as such. Councillor Parr, is that a seconding that?
Yep, I second that.
Okay, so the first thing we've got to do, please, is all those in favour of a recorded vote, please indicate by using your green ticks. All those against a recorded vote with your red cross, please.
I think sorry, excuse me, Councillor Arnott, you're not voting?
Okay, Chair, I have 38 votes in favour and 2 against.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think that means we will be doing a recorded vote. Are you in a position to administer this for me, Sue, please?
Yes, of course, Chair.
Chair, just before you go to the vote, can I just clarify that you're encapsulating recommendations 2 and 3 into this now because it is option 2 that's being proposed?
Well, I wasn't aware it was, I thought it was a straight choice between option 1 and option 2. I wasn't aware that anyone had actually been specifically proposed.
Well, I think Councillor Howard put forward option 2, and that was seconded by Councillor Miller. But the reason I say that is because recommendation 2 is only relevant if option 2 is on the table.
Recommendation 2. Yes, yeah. Well, can we then do it, Henry, to simplify this? Can we have it that option 1 is basically staying as we are, and option 2 is the hybrid solution as proposed with all the implications from the subsidiary recommendations? Does that make it clear for everybody?
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question against that?
Sorry, could I come back in a second? So Henry, what's not clear about that?
Right, so recommendation 3 applies irrespective of whether it's 1 and 2.
Yes.
But recommendation 2 only applies if option 2 is agreed. So
correct, exactly that.
So I mean, it's tautologous in a way, because if option 2 fails, then you're going to have a vote on option 1. But for clarity and for recording, for my purposes,
it'd be preferable if you can take a vote on option 2 with recommendation 2 and recommendation 3.
Chair, could I change my proposal to do exactly that?
See what what we're proposing now is you're proposing that actually option 2 goes forward, including within all its respects. Is that correct?
Exactly that, Chair.
Yep.
If that makes it simpler. Now, if that then fails, we're going with option 1. Is that correct?
No, you have to. It's odd, but you have to have a vote on option 1, which you would then expect to get by reciprocal vote. But yes,
one would hope so. Yes. Right. Okay. Then. So what we
not unheard of for it not to happen.
So what we have then is a recorded vote for the adoption of option 2, which is the hybrid solution as per para 1B. Excuse me. With all the subsequent aspects and other recommendations as set. Is that correct, Mike?
I am happy with that, Chair.
And we had a seconder to that was whom?
Yeah, can I ask a question?
In a second, please, Sarah.
I'm happy with that.
It is relevant.
That was Councillor Parr, wasn't it? Right, sorry. Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, very much. My only query is that I appreciate the report's been written the way it is, but conceivably, is there no reason where option 1A could be voted on and option 2 mindful of future proofing? Appreciate that option 1B would require option 2, but I'm just conscious of looking ahead to the future. Should 1A be successful over 1B?
I've got to be honest, Councillor Jackson, if we started going down that route now, we'd be forced to go through another round of amendments, and I'm not disposed to go that route. I think we've done that enough now. I think this certainly, whichever route is taken, we would always be taking as a future-facing, modernising council a future view of anyway as to how things can work. That doesn't preclude that in the future. So anyway, the request of the monitor.
But would that be an amendment?
No, it won't.
Making item 1A first and then moving down the recommendations in order. I don't know that would be amendment, would it?
I thank you for your question, Councillor Jackson, but I'm inclined to follow the monitoring officer's advice. And what we'll be doing is we'll be voting on option 2, which is para 1B, and that would be including also of paragraph 2 and the relevant elements of the subsequent paragraphs. Is that actually clear, Henry?
It's the entirety of 3.
Yeah. So all right, then the entirety of 3.
Chair, before you start, it was Councillor Miller that seconded it, not Councillor Parr.
Right, my apologies. We'll be fighting to second you, the mic. So we're doing this by recorded vote. Is everybody clear what we're actually voting on? So this is to adopt option 2, which is the hybrid solution with all the subsequent implications of that alternative. Yeah? So if Sue will do your recorded vote, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Arnott.
Against.
Councillor Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Bickley.
Against.
Councillor Blakey. Councillor Bonetta.
For, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Bruce.
For, Susan.
Councillor Cahill.
Against.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Against.
Councillor Chapman.
For.
Councillor Chubb. Councillor Davey.
Against.
Councillor Desarum.
I don't know. I've got to speak in a minute.
Councillor Dent.
For.
Councillor Faithful.
For.
Councillor Gardner.
Against.
Councillor Gazzard.
Against.
Councillor Hartnell.
For.
Councillor Hawkins.
For.
Councillor Hayward.
I don't think he's in the meeting anymore, Sue.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway.
Against.
Councillor Howe.
For.
Councillor Hughes.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
Against.
Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Johns.
Against, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Young.
Against.
Councillor Kemp.
Against, thank you.
Councillor Key. Councillor Ledger.
Against, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Loudon.
Against, Sue, thanks.
Councillor Manley.
Against.
Councillor McCollum.
For, thank you, sir.
Councillor Miller.
For, thank you, Sue.
Councillor Moulding.
For.
Councillor Parr.
For.
Councillor Pook.
For.
Councillor Ranger.
Against.
Councillor Rickson.
Against.
Councillor Rowland.
Against.
Councillor Rylance.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Thomas. Councillor Thomas.
Abstain, Sue.
Councillor Twister's left. Councillor Wibley.
Against.
Councillor Woodward.
Against.
Councillor Ragg.
Against.
Councillor Chris Rice.
Against.
Councillor Tom Rice. Okay. If you can bear with me a moment, Chair.
Sue, did I hear you call me Councillor Tom Wright?
I did call Councillor Tom Wright, yes.
I think my microphone, for, thank you.
And Sue, if I may interject as well, I didn't actually give you an answer. You moved on to the next one.
Sorry, pardon me, Councillor Bakley.
My vote was for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chair, if I may, is it worth just going through the other absentees just to make sure that they haven't been missed? I don't know whether the chair can hear me.
I can hear you, but I'm inclined actually, if they weren't in the meeting at the time the vote was taken, Henry, that should be deemed, irrespective of their views, that should be deemed as being passed now. So I think we freeze the vote as per what Sue has now, whatever the outcome might be.
Bear with me, Chair. Okay, Chair. I have 18 votes for, 25 against, and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. So that fails. So we now go immediately into, I guess we have to vote on option 1 now, Henry, is that correct?
Yes, so it'll be for option. Well, if you're going to move it from the chair, I presume. So it'll be.
Well, I'll move it from the chair now because I don't see any point in any debate or anything, and it should be straightforward. Because I hope you give me an interesting constitutional issue if it isn't.
Yeah. So option 1 and recommendation 3, please.
Correct. Right. So there we go. So moving from the chair, option 1 coupled with recommendation 3, please. We'll have a recorded vote again, I assume.
No, you don't need a recorded vote unless it's moved for this one, so you can do green ticks and red crosses.
Okay, well, let's do green tick. Let's go straight to it then. Green ticks in favour of option 1, and red crosses against. And
sorry, can I just ask? This is Councillor Rickson. You're saying option 1. Surely it's 1A.
Sorry, well, it's para 1A, option 1. So it is actually option 1, but it is actually in para 1A to avoid any confusion, and coupled with paragraph 3. Everybody clear? So all those in favour, please, with the green tick. All those against with the red cross, and any abstentions, whatever, with the yellow gloves.
Okay, Chair, I have 25 for and 16 against.
Thank you very much. That's clearly passed. So we'll be recommending to the monitoring officer and the senior officers that actually we adopt option 1 as per paragraph 1A, effectively to continue our current arrangements through to October 31st, 2022. At this point, this brings our council meeting to an end, and I'd like to thank everyone, including members of the public, for their attendance. Members, could I remind you that until Democratic Services team has confirmed that the live streaming and recording has stopped, we can still be seen and heard, and any comments made may be recorded. So please, if we could keep quiet until